Nina and happy STAMPtember. I'm featuring the new Heffy Doodle stamp set that is a collaboration for our STAMPtember celebration. And this stamp set is full of so many cute and adorable images illustrated in the way that Heffy Doodle is well known for. So this stamp set comes with some fun critters and some accessories that you can have them holding, plus lots of fun sentiments. Now, to build my card, I'm going to be using a few elements that I've already pre-cut. The first is a rectangle that I've cut a circle into that's going to be a window. Through that circle window, you're going to see some leaf frond die cuts that I've already cut out from 2 different colors of green cardstock. And I'll layer these behind my window, filling in the background. I also used our BIRCH circle die set, and these are all some of our Simon Says Stamp exclusive dies. This birch tree will go over top of our leaves and help us build a really fun scene. Now I stamped all of the images from the More Than S'mores Heffy Doodle exclusive collaboration set onto some Strathmore watercolor paper. I really love the texture of this watercolor paper. It's one of my most favorites, and I love being able to use this with a dry brush technique. If you've never tried this technique, this is a really fun way to get a lot of really unique texture on your images that you're coloring. It's also a great technique to use if you're not comfortable with doing detailed watercolor. So I'm going to walk you through the steps on how I actually create this technique. So I start by applying down some color. And I'm not using a wet brush. I'm using wet paint and my brush is pretty dry. You want the brush to be slightly damp, but you don't want it to have any excess water. I usually dab off my brush onto a damp paper towel or baby wipe, and that gives my brush enough moisture to keep the watercolors moving, but at the same time it's not wet enough that I'm going to get a perfectly blended look. My paints are the wettest portion of this entire process, and because they're wet, that's allowing the dry brush to move those colors enough that you get this fun texture. And another great feature about this technique is that it allows your colors to stay vibrant. When you're using very little water, the pigment stays more intense. So you get that really great, vibrant color, and it really adds a lot of beautiful, whimsical fun to your images. As I've used this brush, remember it's not very wet, and you can see it's not moving the color a lot. That's helping you maintain a lot more control too. But by pushing on the brush and having very little water on this brush, you're seeing that it's moving the color and giving you a lot of texture because of the way the bristles are splaying. See how as I flatten this down across the paper, the bristles are a lot more spread out rather than in a nice fine point as if you had a lot of water on your brush. So I colored all of my images in this way. That gave the images a lot of really great interest, and like I said, it really adds to the whimsical fun. For all of the watercoloring, I did use the Altenew watercolor set. This is a 36 set of lots of different colors, and they work really well together across this entire palette. Now, because we're doing a dry brush technique, we can also watercolor with that same dry brush effect on cardstock. Normally, you wouldn't want to color on cardstock with watercolors because they can't hold much water. However, when you're using the dry brush effect, you're just putting wet pigment onto the paper and you're using a very dry brush. See how I'm not dipping my brush into any water? And when I do wipe my brush off, I wipe it off onto a damp towel. It's giving me barely any moisture on the brush, but it's enough to get the color moving because we're using wet watercolor, and that's allowing the colors to get that really great textured and splayed effect. I also like adding interest to my images by using a white gel pen, and I'm using that particularly on the tree bark because I'm adding those white highlights to the nooks and crannies of the tree. Now I need to start building my scene at this point, so I'm adding adhesive to each of my circles and I'm layering them behind my window panel. As I layer the leaf portions of my scene, I'm making sure to rotate them so that the leaves aren't going to be overlapping in the same direction. So if I have it rotated a little bit, you're seeing the leaves peek out from behind each other and gives it a really nice full effect. I'm adding my images down onto my card at this point, but I need to be able to attach this down onto my card base. And because I want this to be a window, I need to cut a window into the actual card itself. So I'm using the same circle die, which is from a Simon Says Stamp circle die set. I'm using that same die that I used for the window of my panel to cut that same size window out of the card base. So I just lined it up behind my window, and now I'm going ahead and removing the die from my card, and I have a great circle window now placed perfectly into the center portion of my card, which will line up perfectly with the panel. I finished off the card by adding all of my images into my scene, and I used many of the little smaller elements such as the pumpkins, the 2 cups of coffee, lots of sentiments, and some very colorful leaves. I love how this scene came together with all of these different critters and elements, and it really just makes me feel so excited for fall. It's been a really hot summer all over the place, and the cooler weather is definitely welcome. So I hope that this has inspired you to enjoy creating with the Heffy Doodle More Than S'mores STAMPtember stamp set that is a Simon Says STAMPtember 2018 exclusive. You can find more information on this stamp and die set that's over at the Simon Says Stamp blog. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will be back again very soon with more inspiration for you, and have a very happy STAMPtember.